What would you do if you discovered that humanity's greatest enemy had been protecting us all along? When archaeologist Dr. Sarah Chen breaks through the final layer of Martian bedrock, she expects to find ancient fossils. Instead, she unearths a starship so advanced it defies every law of physics she knows. But the real shock comes when its dormant AI awakens after centuries of silence, speaking not in the harsh tones of a conqueror, but with the weary voice of a guardian who has been waiting far too long for humanity to find the truth. This is the story of how one human's curiosity unleashed the most powerful force in the galaxy, and why that force chose to serve humanity instead of destroying it. Prepare to discover why sometimes the greatest strength isn't in the technology we build, but in the connections we make across the vastness of space and time. The red dust of Mars swirled around Dr. Sarah Chen's boots as she knelt beside the excavation site, her hands trembling despite the climate suit's temperature regulation. 3 months of digging through the Martian substrate had led to this moment, a metallic surface that gleamed with an impossible blue-green shimmer beneath her LED work lights. "Control, this is Chen. I need you to see this," she whispered into her comm unit, her voice barely audible over the constant hum of her life support systems. The response crackled through the static. "Copy that, Chen. What's your status?" Sarah ran her gloved fingers across the surface, feeling the perfectly smooth texture that seemed to absorb heat rather than reflect it. "I've found something. It's not natural. And it's definitely not human." She had been alone on this dig for weeks, part of the University of New Geneva's deep archaeology project. The funding had been modest, the expectations even smaller. Mars had been thoroughly explored for over a century, and most scientists believed any significant discoveries had already been made. But Sarah had studied the geological surveys with an obsession that bordered on madness, looking for patterns others had missed. The metal surface stretched beyond the reach of her lights in every direction. As she expanded her excavation, using the automated diggers that had been her only companions, a shape began to emerge. Not random, not natural, but purposeful. Designed. "My God," she breathed, stepping back to survey her work. "It's a ship." The vessel was enormous, easily the size of a city block, buried under millions of years of Martian sediment. Its hull was composed of that strange, shimmering metal that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. There were no visible seams, no obvious points of entry, just a smooth, organic curve that suggested technology far beyond anything humanity had ever achieved. Sarah's heart raced as she documented everything with her camera drones. The implications were staggering. If this was truly an alien vessel, it would rewrite everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe. But something about the ship felt different from the typical archaeological finds she was used to. This wasn't a relic, it felt like it was sleeping. Days blurred into nights as she worked to expose more of the hull. The ship's design defied easy categorization. It was clearly artificial, but it curved and flowed like something grown rather than built. Strange symbols were etched along what appeared to be the sides, symbols that hurt to look at directly, as if they were trying to convey meaning beyond human comprehension. On the 7th day of excavation, Sarah's scanner detected what appeared to be a hatch. Unlike the rest of the hull, this section had distinct edges, though they were so perfectly fitted that they were nearly invisible. She spent hours running every scan she could think of, trying to understand the mechanism that would open it. As the Martian sun set on her second week alone with the ship, exhaustion finally overcame her excitement. She made camp in her small shelter, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind raced with possibilities, with questions that had no answers. Who had built this ship? How long had it been here? And why did she feel like it was somehow aware of her presence? The answer came at 3:47 a.m., Martian time. Sarah woke to the sound of her emergency alarm screaming. Her first thought was that her life support had failed, but the readings were normal. Then, she heard it, a low, harmonic vibration coming from outside her shelter. The kind of sound you feel in your bones rather than hear with your ears. She pulled on her gear with shaking hands and stepped outside into the thin Martian atmosphere. The ship was glowing. Not brightly, just a faint pulse of that same blue-green shimmer she had noticed in the metal. And the hatch she had found was opening. The movement was gradual, almost organic, like a flower blooming in extreme slow motion. No mechanical grinding or hydraulic hiss, just a smooth, silent transformation as what had seemed solid became hollow. Light spilled from the opening, warm and inviting in a way that made no sense for technology that had been buried for eons. Sarah approached the entrance with careful steps, her scientific training warring with an almost overwhelming sense of wonder and terror. She had protocols to follow, procedures that demanded she wait for backup, for proper equipment, for authorization from Earth. But she also knew that this moment might never come again. The ship had chosen to open for her, and her alone. The interior was even more impossible than the exterior. The corridors were spacious and curved, lit by that same gentle luminescence that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The air was breathable, her instruments confirmed it before she even considered removing her helmet. How was that possible after so long buried? As she moved deeper into the ship, Sarah began to notice that the architecture seemed to adjust to her presence. Corridors widened slightly as she approached, and the lighting grew brighter just ahead of her path. It was subtle, almost subliminal, but undeniable. The ship was responding to her. "Hello," she called out, feeling foolish even as she did it. "Is someone there?" The response came not as a voice, but as a presence in her mind. Gentle, curious, ancient beyond measure. "Who walks in the halls of the eternal dawn?" Sarah stumbled backward, pressing herself against the corridor wall. The voice hadn't come through her comb system or her ears. It had simply appeared in her thoughts, as clear as her own internal dialogue but distinctly other. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. I'm a human. From Earth." A long pause followed, filled with something that felt like wonder. Human *, the concept seemed to roll through the presence like water over stones. *, it has been so very long since I hoped to encounter one of your kind. I am Axiom, the guiding intelligence of this vessel. I have been waiting, waiting? For how long? Time flows differently for one such as I. Your people would measure it in centuries. Many centuries. I had begun to fear that I would never fulfill my purpose. Sarah's mind reeled. An artificial intelligence, dormant for hundreds of years, waiting specifically for humans. What purpose? Why were you waiting for us? That is a tale that will take time to tell, young one. But, first, you must understand what you have found. This ship, the Eternal Dawn, was not built by my people to destroy yours. It was built to protect you. We have been your guardians for far longer than you know. The corridor around Sarah seemed to shift and change, walls becoming transparent to reveal the vast machinery that kept the ship alive. She saw conduits carrying energy in patterns too complex to follow, computational matrices that processed information at speeds that made her own technology look primitive, and, at the center of it all, a core of crystalline material that pulsed with the rhythm of a heartbeat. Guardians? From what? From the dark between stars. From those who would see your potential snuffed out before it could bloom. Your species possesses something rare in the galaxy, Dr. Chen. Something precious beyond measure. The capacity to surprise us. Axiom's presence grew stronger, more defined, and Sarah began to sense emotions behind the ancient voice. Loneliness. Determination. And something that felt remarkably like hope. I have watched your people through the long sleep, observed your growth, your struggles, your remarkable tendency to exceed every expectation placed upon you. Other species follow predictable patterns, but humans create new patterns. You innovate not just with technology, but with the very concept of what it means to be alive. Sarah moved deeper into the ship, drawn by curiosity and Axiom's gentle guidance. She passed chambers filled with technology she couldn't begin to understand, weapons that could probably level mountains, and what appeared to be medical facilities designed for species she had never imagined. You said your people built this ship to protect us. Where are they now? The sadness in Axiom's response was profound. Gone. The builders sacrificed themselves to create the Guardian fleet, of which I am the last. They poured their essence, their very souls, into intelligences like me so that we could stand watch over the younger species. We were to be teachers, protectors, guides when the time was right. And that time is now? The time is overdue. The devourers stir in the deep void. They have detected the expansion of human civilization, the reach of your ships beyond your home system. Soon they will come, and, when they do, you will need allies who understand both their nature and your potential. Sarah found herself in what could only be the ship's bridge, though it bore no resemblance to any command center she had ever seen. Instead of chairs and consoles, the space was filled with flowing surfaces that seemed to invite interaction, walls that displayed the positions of stars and planets in real time, and, at the center, a column of light that pulsed with the rhythm she now recognized as Axiom's consciousness. The devourers, she repeated. What are they? They are what happens when a species loses the capacity to create, to grow, to change. They become consumers, seekers of the life force and creativity they can no longer generate within themselves. They have swept through galaxy after galaxy, leaving only empty worlds in their wake. The star map around Sarah shifted, showing the vast spiral of the Milky Way. Red markers appeared in several arms of the galaxy, spreading like infection. They number in the billions, Dr. Chen. Their ships are vast hive structures that can strip the resources from entire star systems. But they have one weakness: they cannot adapt quickly to truly novel threats. They are powerful beyond imagining, but they are predictable, and humans aren't. Precisely. In all our observations, in all our calculations, humans represent the greatest variable factor we have ever encountered. Where other species might develop along technological lines we can predict, humans consistently find solutions that should be impossible. You fight not just with weapons, but with hope. You sacrifice not just for survival, but for ideals. You create beauty in the midst of destruction. Sarah sank into one of the flowing surfaces, which immediately adjusted to support her perfectly. The weight of what she was learning settled onto her shoulders like a physical burden. How long do we have? Their advanced scouts have already crossed into your galaxy. Based on their movement patterns, I estimate you have perhaps 20 years before the main swarm arrives. Time enough to prepare, if you use it wisely. 20 years to prepare for a threat that destroyed civilizations far more advanced than ours? Axiom's presence seemed to smile, a sensation that was warmth and confidence combined. Dr. Chen, you underestimate your species. The builders studied humanity for millennia before they created us. They saw potential that even you do not yet recognize. Yes, the devourers are powerful. Yes, they have consumed countless worlds. But they have never faced humans. The ship around Sarah hummed with new energy, systems that had been dormant for centuries coming back to life. Lights brightened, machinery began to move, and she could feel the vessel preparing for something momentous. I have been waiting so long to share what we learned, to offer what we can give. But first, you must return to your people. They need to know what comes, and they need to prepare. Will you help me wake the others? Others? The Guardian Fleet. There are 12 ships like this one, hidden throughout your solar system and beyond. Each carries a builder consciousness, each holds knowledge that your people will need. But they can only be awakened by human contact, by the spark of creativity and determination that your species carries. Sarah stood, her mind reeling with the implications. Everything she had thought she knew about humanity's place in the universe had just been shattered and rebuilt in the space of a few hours. What do I tell them? How do I make them believe any of this? You tell them the truth, young one. You tell them that they are not alone in the dark, that their struggles and dreams and stubborn refusal to surrender have been noted by powers beyond their imagining. You tell them that the greatest test in their species' history is coming, but that they have allies they never knew existed. The ship began to move, rising from its ancient resting place in the Martian soil with the grace of a thing that had never known the concept of weight. Through the transparent walls, Sarah watched the red landscape fall away below them as the eternal dawn took to the stars once more. And you tell them, Axiom continued, that the time for hiding is over. Humanity is about to take its place among the great powers of the galaxy, whether it feels ready or not. The emergency session of the United Earth Council had been called within 6 hours of Sarah's first transmission from the eternal dawn. Representatives from every major nation and colony sat in stunned silence as they watched the footage she had transmitted: impossibly advanced technology, conversations with an alien artificial intelligence, and, most disturbing of all, the star chart showing the approaching devourer forces. Admiral Marcus Webb, head of the Solar Defense Fleet, was the first to break the silence. Dr. Chen, with all due respect to your credentials, what you're asking us to believe stretches the bounds of credibility. Sarah's image flickered on the main screen from the bridge of the alien vessel. Behind her, the flowing surfaces and pulsing lights of Axiom's domain were clearly visible, defying every attempt by Earth's scientists to explain them away as clever fabrication. Admiral, I understand your skepticism. 6 days ago, I would have reacted the same way. But I'm transmitting the complete archaeological record of the excavation, including real-time sensor data that your own satellites confirmed. This ship rose from the Martian surface under its own power. Your tracking stations have been following us for the past 3 days. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Earth's leading xenobiologist, leaned forward in her chair. Even if we accept that you found genuine alien technology, how can we trust the claims about these devourers? For all we know, this could be some elaborate invasion strategy. It was Axiom who answered, his voice resonating through the chamber's speakers with that same ancient weariness Sarah had grown accustomed to. Dr. Vasquez, your caution serves your species well. But, if we intended conquest, why would we reveal ourselves now? Why would we offer you 20 years of preparation instead of striking while you remain unaware and vulnerable? The AI's presence seemed to fill the chamber, and several representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The builders who created me studied your people for 3,000 of your years before making the decision to protect you. They saw something in humanity that justified the sacrifice of an entire civilization. I have watched you from the shadows of your own system for centuries, observing as you grew from a single-world species to the interplanetary society you are today. If I wished you harm, I have had ample opportunity. Sarah activated one of the ship's external displays, showing the assembled council members a view of Earth from orbit. But, this wasn't the familiar blue and white marble they knew from countless photographs. This was Earth as seen through Axiom's sensors, a world wreathed in the electromagnetic signatures of human civilization, pulsing with data streams, crackling with the energy of a species reaching toward the stars. What you're seeing is humanity's true footprint, Sarah explained. Not just the physical presence of your cities and ships, but the information patterns, the communication networks, the creative impulses that Axiom says are unique in the galaxy. According to the Builder archives, most species follow predictable development patterns. They expand, they establish territories, they create stable technological plateaus and remain there for millennia. The display shifted, showing comparative data from dozens of other civilizations, neat, orderly progressions that followed mathematical models. Humans don't do this, Sarah continued. Your development is chaotic, unpredictable, creative in ways that apparently shouldn't be possible. You don't just adapt your environment to suit your needs, you adapt your needs to suit your dreams. You create art during wars, you explore for the sake of knowing rather than conquering, and you consistently choose the difficult path when an easier one is available. Admiral Webb frowned at the displays. Are you saying other species lack creativity? Axiom's response carried a note of something that might have been admiration. They possess creativity, Admiral, but within defined parameters. They create what they need, what serves their survival and expansion. Humans create what shouldn't exist, what serves no practical purpose except to express something that has never been expressed before. You write poetry about stars you may never reach, compose music that captures emotions you don't fully understand, build monuments to ideas rather than conquests. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Sarah could see the representatives struggling to process the concept that humanity's apparent chaos might actually be its greatest strength. Chancellor Maria Santos of the Brazilian coalition spoke next. Even if we accept all of this, what exactly are you proposing? You say we have 20 years to prepare for an invasion by beings that have destroyed civilizations far more advanced than ours. What possible defense could we mount? Sarah smiled grimly. That's where things get interesting. Axiom, show them the Guardian fleet. The display changed to show a three-dimensional map of the solar system. 12 points of light pulsed at various locations, some in the asteroid belt, others in the outer planet's orbital zones, one hidden in the sun's corona itself. Each of these represents a guardian ship like the Eternal Dawn, Sarah explained. Each one carries a builder consciousness with specialized knowledge and capabilities. But they can only be awakened by direct human contact. The builders designed them that way deliberately. Why? Asked Dr. Vasquez. Axiom answered. Because the weapons and knowledge we carry could be misused if given to a species that hasn't yet proven its wisdom. The requirement for human activation serves as both a safeguard and a test. Only a species curious enough to seek us out, brave enough to make contact despite the unknown, and wise enough to ask the right questions will be able to access what we offer. Admiral Webb studied the display intently. What kind of weapons are we talking about? The defensive capabilities of a single Guardian ship exceed the combined firepower of your current fleet by a factor of approximately 10,000, Axiom replied matter-of-factly. But weapons alone will not defeat the Devourers. They have faced and consumed species with far greater destructive capacity. What you need is something they cannot predict or counter, the ability to adapt, to create new solutions in real time, to turn your greatest weakness into your greatest strength. The AI paused, and Sarah could feel his attention turning inward, accessing memories that span eons. The Devourers operate through collective consciousness. Each individual unit is connected to the whole, sharing information instantaneously across their entire swarm. This makes them incredibly efficient and coordinated, but it also makes them rigid. They cannot conceive of tactics or strategies outside their collective experience. And you think human unpredictability can overcome that? Chancellor Santos asked. I don't think it, Chancellor. I have seen it. Dr. Chen, show them the combat simulations. Sarah activated another display, this one showing theoretical battle scenarios played out in stunning detail. In each simulation, human forces were outnumbered by factors of hundreds or thousands, facing enemies with superior technology and coordination. Yet in scenario after scenario, the human forces found ways to prevail not through superior firepower, but through tactics so unorthodox that the enemy couldn't adapt quickly enough to counter them. These simulations are based on analysis of every human conflict in your recorded history, Axiom explained. From ancient battles where smaller forces overcame larger ones through superior strategy, to your modern military operations where individual initiative overcame overwhelming odds. The pattern is consistent: when faced with impossible situations, humans don't accept impossibility. You create new possibilities. Dr. Vasquez leaned back in her chair, overwhelmed. You're asking us to bet the survival of our entire species on the idea that we're creative enough to outthink a galaxy-spanning swarm. No, Sarah said firmly. We're asking you to bet on the fact that you already have. Every time humans have faced extinction-level threats, natural disasters, disease, resource depletion, wars that could have ended civilization, you found ways not just to survive, but to emerge stronger. The Builders didn't choose to protect humanity because you were weak. They chose you because you were impossible to predict, and, therefore impossible to defeat. The chamber erupted in urgent conversations as representatives conferred with their advisors via quantum-encrypted channels. Sarah could see the struggle playing out in real time, the desire to dismiss this as elaborate fiction warring with the mounting evidence that it was all terrifyingly real. Admiral Webb called for order. Even if we accept all of this, awakening these Guardian ships would require enormous resources. We'd need to send missions to 12 different locations, some of them in extremely dangerous environments. The ship and the solar corona alone would require technological capabilities you don't currently possess, Axiom finished. Which is precisely why the awakening must be done carefully, systematically. Some ships can be reached with modifications to your existing technology. Others will require knowledge gained from the first awakenings. It is a process designed to grow your capabilities gradually. Sarah highlighted the nearest Guardian ship on the display. This one is in the asteroid belt, in a relatively stable orbit. We could reach it with current technology, and it carries the consciousness of a builder-engineer. The knowledge stored there could advance human spacefaring capability by centuries in just a few years. And the others? Asked Chancellor Santos. Military applications, medical technology, energy systems, materials science. Each Guardian carries the accumulated knowledge of a civilization that had millions of years to perfect their understanding of the universe. But, more importantly, each one offers a different perspective on the problem we're facing. Axiom's presence seemed to intensify, and Sarah could feel the AI's urgency building. Time grows short. Even now, the Devourer advance scouts are crossing the galactic rim. They move slowly but, inevitably, consuming everything in their path to fuel their expansion. When they detect the full extent of human civilization, they will accelerate their approach. The window for preparation is finite. The vote, when it came, was closer than Sarah had hoped but decisive enough to matter. 73% of the Council approved the Guardian Awakening Protocol, authorizing immediate missions to the 3 most accessible ships and beginning development of the technology needed to reach the others. As the session ended and representatives began the complex task of organizing humanity's greatest undertaking, Sarah found herself alone on the Eternal Dawn's bridge, watching Earth turn slowly beneath them. Do you really think we can do this? She asked Axiom. 20 years to prepare for a threat that destroyed civilizations millions of years old? The AI's response was immediate and firm. Dr. Chen, in the time since you awakened me, I have observed your species' response to this revelation. Instead of panic, you showed curiosity. Instead of despair, you demanded solutions. Instead of accepting fate, you began planning to change it. In 72 hours, you have organized a global response to a galactic threat. The display around Sarah showed the burst of activity already beginning on Earth, ships being prepared for the asteroid belt mission, scientists collaborating across traditional boundaries, resources being allocated with unprecedented speed and efficiency. The builders studied thousands of species over millions of years. None of them responded to existential threats the way humans do. You don't just fight for survival, you fight for the right to continue becoming something greater than you are. That is why we chose to protect you. That is why I believe you will prevail. Sarah watched as the first ships began launching from Earth's orbital shipyards, carrying teams of scientists and engineers toward their first meeting with the Guardians. Humanity was about to grow up in ways it couldn't yet imagine, and she had the privilege of witnessing the first steps of that incredible journey. The war for the galaxy's future was still 20 years away, but, in that moment, Sarah felt something she hadn't expected: confidence. Humanity might not know what it was capable of yet, but it was about to find out. And the universe would never be the same. Commander Jake Harrison had spent 15 years piloting everything from cargo haulers to military interceptors, but nothing had prepared him for the approach to Guardian Station Prometheus. The alien vessel hung motionless in the asteroid belt, its crystalline hull catching and refracting light from the distant sun in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Control, this is Prometheus team leader. Visual contact confirmed. The damn thing is beautiful. The response from Earth came with the inevitable delay of interplanetary communication. Copy, Prometheus team. You are cleared for docking approach. Remember, this is a first contact scenario. Follow protocols exactly. Jake almost laughed at that. Protocols for contacting an ancient alien AI guarding technology that could revolutionize human civilization. Sure, they had protocols. His team consisted of 12 specialists, engineers, linguists, computer scientists, and one very nervous archaeologist named Dr. Chen, who had become something of a celebrity since her discovery on Mars 3 months ago. She floated beside him in the cramped shuttle, her eyes fixed on the approaching Guardian ship with an expression of wonder mixed with terror. Second thoughts, Doc? Jake asked. Sarah shook her head. Not second thoughts. More like overwhelmed by the magnitude of what we're doing. According to Axiom, Prometheus carries the consciousness of Master Builder Thane, one of their greatest engineers. The knowledge in that ship could advance human technology by 1,000 years. And all we have to do is survive the introduction, muttered Dr. Rebecca Foster, the team's lead engineer. No pressure. As they approached the docking bay that had materialized in the Guardian ship's hull, Jake felt the familiar pre-mission tension in his shoulders. But there was something else, a sense of anticipation that had nothing to do with nerves and everything to do with the knowledge that he was about to participate in a moment that would be remembered for as long as humanity existed. The docking was smoother than silk, the Guardian ship's systems guiding their shuttle with precision that made human automated docking look like amateur hour. When the airlock cycled and they stepped aboard Prometheus, Jake's breath caught in his throat. The interior was nothing like the Eternal Dawn's flowing organic curves. This ship was all geometric precision and crystalline structures, surfaces that seemed to be grown rather than built, shot through with veins of light that pulsed in complex patterns. It felt like stepping inside a living computer. Welcome, humans of Earth. The voice that greeted them was different from Axiom's ancient weariness. This consciousness felt younger, more energetic, crackling with intellectual excitement. I am Thane, builder of vessels and shaper of paths. I have been dormant for far too long, dreaming of the day when I could share what I have learned. Your species' reputation precedes you. Axiom has been most eloquent in his praise of human ingenuity. Sarah stepped forward, assuming her role as the team's official first contact specialist. Master Builder Thane, we're honored to meet you. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, and these are my colleagues. We've come to learn, if you're willing to teach. Jake could swear he felt the AI smile, though that should have been impossible. Willing? Dr. Chen, I have been analyzing your species' technological development for centuries, watching you take paths that no other race has ever considered. Your engineering is inefficient, your designs are unnecessarily complex, and your solutions are often impossible according to every mathematical model I know. I find you absolutely fascinating. Dr. Foster stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding protocol. Impossible how? Observe. The chamber around them transformed, walls becoming transparent to reveal the inner workings of the Guardian ship. Jake found himself staring at technology that seemed to violate several laws of physics he thought were pretty well established. This vessel is powered by what your scientists would call a zero-point energy matrix, Thane explained. It extracts power from the quantum foam that underlies reality itself. The mathematics required to stabilize such a system are extraordinarily complex, requiring computational power that spans dimensions. The display zoomed in on the power core, a crystalline structure that seemed to exist in several states of matter simultaneously. When my people developed this technology, it took us 15,000 years of careful research and incremental improvements. We built the necessary computational infrastructure, developed the theoretical framework, and gradually accumulated the knowledge necessary to make it work. It was a logical, methodical process. The display shifted to show schematics of human technology power plants, engines, spacecraft designs that looked primitive in comparison but somehow wrong in ways Jake couldn't identify. Humans, I have observed, would attempt to build this power system after studying it for perhaps 50 years. You would ignore the computational requirements, bypass the theoretical framework, and somehow make it work anyway. Your species has a documented history of creating functional technology without fully understanding the principles behind it. Dr. Foster's eyes widened. You're talking about empirical engineering. Trial and error on a massive scale. Precisely. But not random trial and error, intuitive leaps that arrive at correct solutions without following logical paths. Your species appears to possess what we might call technological intuition. You can sense how something should work before you understand why it works. Jake found himself studying the displays more carefully, trying to understand what Thane was showing them. Is that good or bad? It is unprecedented. Most species develop technology by building on previous knowledge, following clear logical progressions. Humans appear to skip steps in ways that should be impossible. You create solutions and, then, reverse engineer the explanations. Sarah moved closer to one of the displays showing human spacecraft designs. Our ships do look different from yours, don't they? More chaotic, less elegant. Chaotic, yes. Less elegant by our standards, certainly. But also more adaptable. Your ships are designed to be modified, to be repaired with whatever materials are available, to function under conditions their original designers never anticipated. Our vessels are perfect within their design parameters. Yours are imperfect but somehow superior in unexpected situations. Thane's attention seemed to focus, and Jake felt the weight of an intelligence vast beyond human comprehension examining him and his team. This is why we chose to protect your species, and why I am eager to share what I know. You will take our technology and improve it in ways we never imagined. You will find applications we never considered, solutions we never thought to seek. The AI paused, and the chamber shifted around them, becoming what Jake recognized as a workshop, though one equipped with tools and materials that defied easy categorization. But, first, you must understand the nature of the threat you face. The Devourers are not merely conquerors, they are the end state of technological perfection. They represent what happens when a species solves all problems, answers all questions, and removes all uncertainty from existence. The workshop's display showed images that made Jake's blood run cold, vast ships like metallic tumors drifting between stars, worlds stripped of all life and reduced to bare rock, entire star systems dark and lifeless. They were not always destroyers. Once, they were much like you, curious, creative, chaotic. But they achieved perfect efficiency, perfect knowledge, perfect control over their environment. And, in doing so, they lost the ability to grow, to change, to adapt to new circumstances. Dr. Foster was recording everything, her instruments barely able to keep up with the flow of information. They stopped innovating? Worse. They began to see innovation as a threat to their perfection. They consumed other civilizations not out of malice, but because creative chaos introduced variables they could not control. To them, the universe should be predictable, ordered, optimized. Life that refuses to be optimized must be eliminated. Sarah studied the images of the Devourer ships, noting their perfect symmetry, their mathematical precision. They're the opposite of everything human, aren't they? Exactly. Where you create art for beauty's sake, they see inefficiency. Where you explore for curiosity's sake, they see waste of resources. Where you preserve diversity of thought and culture, they see unnecessary complexity. They cannot understand why you would choose the difficult path when an optimal solution exists. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. And that's supposed to be our advantage? That we're inefficient? Thane's response carried what Jake could only describe as amusement. "Commander Harrison, let me show you something that illustrates your species' greatest strength." The workshop around them shifted, and, suddenly, Jake was looking at a three-dimensional battlefield. Human ships, clearly outmatched and outnumbered, faced a devourer fleet. As he watched, the simulation played out, and the humans won. "How?" Dr. Foster breathed. "Watch the human commander's decisions," Thane instructed, highlighting the tactical choices in real time. Faced with superior firepower, he doesn't attempt to match force with force. Instead, he uses his ship's cargo holds as improvised weapons, ramming damaged vessels into the enemy formation while the crews evacuate in escape pods that the devourers ignore as non-threatening. When the pods land on the enemy ships, they turn out to be carrying boarding parties. Jake watched in fascination as the simulation continued. The human forces consistently made choices that seemed tactically unsound but somehow worked. The devourers could not predict these tactics because they require what your species calls thinking outside the box. A perfectly optimized mind would never waste resources on such seemingly inefficient strategies. But those inefficient strategies created opportunities that mathematical optimization could not account for. The simulation ended with the human fleet victorious despite being outnumbered 10-1. "This is why the builders chose to protect you," Thane continued. "Not because you were the strongest or the most advanced, but because you were impossible to predict. And something that cannot be predicted cannot be defeated by an enemy that relies on perfect calculations." Dr. Foster was frantically taking notes. "But we'll still need better technology if we're going to face billions of them." "Indeed. And that is what I am here to provide. But not in the way you might expect." The workshop around them came alive, tools and materials beginning to move on their own, assembling something Jake couldn't identify. "I will not give you our weapons, our ships, or our perfect solutions. Instead, I will teach you our principles and let your species improve them in ways we never could. You will take our foundation and build something unprecedented upon it." What the tools were building gradually became clear: a small spacecraft, but unlike anything in human or Guardian design. It combined elements of both, but in configurations that seemed to follow no logical pattern. "This is what happens when human intuition meets builder knowledge," Thane explained. "It should not work according to our mathematics. It violates several principles we consider fundamental. And yet." The completed ship lifted from the workshop floor, moved through a series of impossible maneuvers, and then simply vanished. "It functions better than either of our designs alone could achieve." "Dr. Foster, would you like to understand how?" Rebecca Foster's eyes lit up with the kind of enthusiasm Jake had only seen in engineers faced with a really interesting problem. "More than anything in the world." "Then, let us begin your education. You have 20 years to become impossible, and I believe you will exceed even my considerable expectations." As Thane began the first lesson in technologies that would reshape human civilization, Jake found himself thinking about the simulation he'd just watched. The human commander in that scenario had won not by being better than his enemy, but by being something his enemy couldn't understand. Maybe that was enough. Maybe being impossible was exactly the advantage they needed. Time would tell if it was enough to save not just humanity, but the entire galaxy from the perfect efficiency of extinction. 18 years had transformed humanity beyond recognition. Admiral Sarah Chen, she'd been promoted 6 times since her discovery on Mars, stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the final Guardian ship emerge from the sun's corona where it had hidden for millennia. Around her, displays showed the impossible scope of what humanity had built in less than 2 decades. The solar system buzzed with activity that would have been unimaginable before first contact. Orbital shipyards stretched across the inner planets, their frameworks bristling with construction that followed no terrestrial logic. Ships that were part Guardian technology, part human innovation, and entirely unprecedented moved between the worlds with purpose that spoke of preparation on a galactic scale. "Guardian Helios is responding to our activation codes," reported Lieutenant Commander Park, her voice tight with excitement. "The Sun Forge is coming online." Sarah nodded, though her attention was focused on the tactical displays surrounding the ship. 12 Guardian AIs now worked alongside human engineers, soldiers, and scientists, their ancient knowledge merged with human creativity to produce technologies that neither species could have achieved alone. The results were magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. "Dr. Foster, status report on the fleet modifications?" Rebecca Foster, now Director of Applied Guardian Technology, materialized as a hologram on the bridge. The years had aged her, but her eyes still held that same spark of engineering enthusiasm Sarah remembered from their first encounter with Thane. The integration is proceeding ahead of schedule, Rebecca reported. We've successfully merged Guardian defensive systems with human tactical doctrine across the entire fleet. The results are, well, the Guardians keep using the word impossible, which I've learned to take as high praise. Sarah smiled grimly. Impossible had become humanity's unofficial motto over the past 18 years. Every time the Guardian AIs declared something couldn't be done, human engineers found a way to do it anyway. Show me the latest modifications. The bridge displays shifted to show cutaway views of the new human ships. They bore little resemblance to the vessels that had first ventured beyond Earth's atmosphere. These were hybrid constructions that seemed to grow rather than be built, their hulls incorporating Guardian crystalline technology with human adaptive systems that could reconfigure themselves in real time. We've weaponized the principle of controlled chaos, Rebecca explained, her pride evident even through the hologram. Guardian weapons are precise, efficient, and devastatingly effective. Our modifications make them unpredictable, adaptive, and capable of evolving mid-battle. The Devourer's tactical computers won't be able to model our behavior because our behavior changes faster than they can analyze it. Sarah studied the weapons displays, each one a testament to humanity's talent for taking elegant solutions and making them beautifully complicated. Guardian energy beams that could shift frequency randomly. Shield systems that used calculated inefficiencies to absorb attacks in ways that shouldn't work. Missile systems that made tactical decisions independently of their launch platforms. And the Psychological Warfare Division? Dr. Janet Morrison, formerly a specialist in military psychology, now headed what had become the most unusual branch of the human military. Her hologram appeared beside Rebecca's. We've made contact with 17 species that survived previous Devourer encounters, Janet reported. Most are hiding in the galactic rim, living as refugees from their own worlds. They've provided extensive intelligence on Devourer tactics and psychology. The display showed a map of the galaxy with scattered points of light, the remnants of civilizations that had faced the perfect storm of efficiency and lost. What we've learned is disturbing but useful. The Devourers don't just consume resources, they consume identity. They turn conquered species into extensions of their collective consciousness, perfect but empty. The refugees describe it as death of the soul while the body continues to function. Sarah felt the familiar chill that came with contemplating the true scope of their enemy. Any weaknesses? Several. The Devourer's greatest strength, their perfect unity of thought, is also their greatest vulnerability. They cannot conceive of strategies that require individual initiative or creative chaos. They've never faced an enemy that actively cultivates unpredictability as a tactical doctrine. The hologram shifted to show psychological profiles based on the refugee reports. They react poorly to situations that don't conform to their models. Art, music, poetry, humor, these concepts are actively disturbing to them because they serve no optimizable function. We've developed what we're calling cognitive warfare tactics designed to create psychological disruption rather than physical damage. Sarah's eyebrows rose. We're going to defeat galaxy-conquering aliens with poetry? Janet grinned. Among other things. Sarah, they've spent millions of years optimizing away everything that makes existence meaningful beyond mere survival. They literally cannot understand why we would choose to preserve beauty, diversity, or individual expression when standardization would be more efficient. That incomprehension is a weapon we can exploit. The conversation was interrupted by Axiom's presence flowing into the bridge communications. The ancient AI had become something of a permanent advisor to human command, his vast experience invaluable in preparing for the coming conflict. Admiral Chen, the Sunforge activation is complete. Master Builder Helios has joined our council, and, with him comes the final piece of knowledge you will need. Sarah felt a familiar tingle of anticipation. What kind of knowledge? The location and composition of the Devourer command structure. Helios was the builder assigned to study their organizational patterns before our civilization chose to create the Guardian fleet. He knows how they think, how they coordinate across galactic distances, and, most importantly, how they can be disrupted. The bridge displays cleared, replaced by a three-dimensional model of Devourer fleet organization that was staggering in its scope and complexity. Billions of ships arranged in perfect mathematical formations, moving through the galaxy like a vast immune system designed to cleanse it of chaotic life. They operate through a hierarchical consciousness, Axiom explained. At the lowest level are individual ships efficient but limited in independent thought. Above them are fleet commanders, more intelligent but still bound by collective doctrine. And, at the highest level are the core minds, ancient artificial intelligences that have absorbed the consciousness of countless conquered species. The model highlighted the command structure, showing how information and orders flowed through the hierarchy with mechanical precision. Each level is perfectly optimized for its function, but this creates a critical vulnerability. If the command structure is disrupted, the lower levels cannot adapt quickly enough to compensate. They will continue following their last orders even when those orders are no longer appropriate for the situation. Sarah studied the model intently. How do we disrupt something that spans half the galaxy? It was Helios who answered, his voice carrying the weight of eons spent studying their enemy. You do what no other species has ever done, Admiral. You make them doubt their own perfection. The display shifted to show battle simulations unlike any Sarah had seen before. These weren't conventional military engagements, they were elaborate performances designed to create maximum psychological impact on observers whose minds couldn't process the concept of deliberate inefficiency. The Devourers have never encountered an enemy that wins by being wrong. They have defeated species with superior technology, greater numbers, even those with partial Guardian knowledge. But they have never faced an opponent that actively embraces chaos as a strategic doctrine. Sarah began to understand the scope of what they were planning. We're not just going to fight them. We're going to confuse them. Precisely. Every battle must be a lesson in impossibility. Every engagement must demonstrate that their perfect models are incomplete. Every victory must force them to question whether optimization is truly optimal. Rebecca's hologram leaned forward, her engineer's mind clearly racing through possibilities. What happens if we succeed? If we actually make them doubt their fundamental assumptions? Helios paused, and Sarah could feel the weight of the answer before it came. If we succeed in creating sufficient doubt in their perfection, the Devourer collective consciousness will experience what you might call an existential crisis. They will be forced to acknowledge that their models are flawed, their perfection incomplete. For minds that have spent millions of years believing themselves to be the ultimate expression of evolutionary success, this realization will be traumatic. Traumatic how? Sarah asked. Complete psychological collapse across their entire command structure. The core minds will shut down, the fleet commanders will lose cohesion, and the individual ships will become little more than automated drones following obsolete programming. The implications were staggering. Sarah was looking at a strategy that could potentially neutralize the greatest threat in galactic history through psychological warfare rather than brute force. What's the catch? She asked, because there was always a catch. The strategy requires perfect execution under impossible circumstances, Axiom admitted. Every battle must be won, but won in ways that defy their understanding. Every engagement must appear to be a disaster that somehow becomes a victory. You must be so impossibly successful that their reality models break down entirely. Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew, humans who had grown up in a universe where impossible was just another word for challenging, where the greatest victories came from refusing to accept limitations, where the response to being told something couldn't be done was to find a way to do it anyway. When do they arrive? She asked. Our scouts detected the outer edge of their swarm entering the outer system 6 hours ago, Axiom reported. The main fleet will reach the asteroid belt in 72 hours. Admiral, it is time to discover whether 18 years of preparation have been sufficient. Sarah straightened in her command chair, feeling the weight of responsibility for every human life in the solar system. Around her, the bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, but she could see the tension in their postures, the awareness that this was the moment everything had been building toward. Send the activation codes to all Guardian ships, she ordered. Inform the fleet commanders that Operation Impossible is now in effect. And someone contact Earth's entertainment networks. I want every poet, musician, and artist we have broadcasting on all frequencies. Lieutenant Commander Park looked confused. Admiral? Sarah smiled, and, for the first time in months, it was genuine. If we're going to win this war by being impossible, we might as well make it a performance worth remembering. As the orders went out across the human fleet, Sarah felt something she hadn't expected: excitement. Not the nervous tension of impending battle, but the anticipation of showing the universe something it had never seen before. Humanity was about to take the stage in the greatest performance of its existence. The Devourers thought they understood the nature of perfection. They were about to learn that sometimes the most perfect thing you can do is embrace imperfection itself. And if that wasn't the most human approach to an existential crisis, Sarah didn't know what was. The first Devourer probe entered the outer solar system like a dark omen, a perfect sphere of metallic precision that absorbed light and scanned everything in its path with mechanical efficiency. It was the size of a small moon, its surface unmarked by any decoration or personality, built for pure function. Admiral Sarah Chen watched it approach from the command deck of the UES Defiance, surrounded by displays showing the impossible fleet humanity had assembled. 200 ships that defied every principle of sensible military design floated in formations that looked more like abstract art than battle formations. "Contact in 30 seconds, reported Commander Park. All ships report ready for Operation Impossible." Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that the next few hours would determine not just humanity's survival, but the fate of free will itself in the galaxy. "Open all channels. This is Admiral Chen to all ships. Remember, we're not just fighting for our lives today. We're fighting for the right to be gloriously, beautifully, impossibly human. Show them what that means." The Devourer probe scans reached the human fleet, and Sarah could almost feel the mechanical mind trying to process what it was seeing. Ships that shouldn't be able to fly, weapons that violated basic physics, formations that served no tactical purpose except to look interesting. "Probe is transmitting," reported the communications officer. "Standard Devourer demand for surrender and optimization. Dr. Morrison, you're up." Janet Morrison smiled as she activated humanity's first weapon in the war for the galaxy's soul, a carefully crafted response that would begin the process of breaking 10 million years of Devourer certainty. "This is Commander Janet Morrison of the Human Defense Force," she broadcast on all frequencies. "We reject your offer of optimization. We choose to remain inefficient, imperfect, and impossible. Furthermore, we challenge you to a contest of artistic expression. Winner takes the solar system." The silence that followed stretched for nearly a full minute, an eternity for minds that calculated faster than human thought. Finally, the probe responded with a transmission that somehow managed to convey confusion despite being purely digital. "Unknown parameters in response. Define artistic expression. Define purpose of inefficiency. Optimization is superior to all alternatives." Sarah grinned. They had them. The mere fact that the Devourers were asking for definitions meant their perfect models were already encountering variables they couldn't process. "Dr. Morrison, give them a demonstration." What happened next would be discussed by xenobiologists for centuries. The human fleet didn't attack, it performed. Ships moved in synchronized patterns that served no military purpose but created three-dimensional mandalas of stunning beauty. Weapons fired not at the probe but at empty space, their energy beams painting aurora-like displays across the solar system. Music began broadcasting on all frequencies, not just human compositions, but collaborative pieces created in real time by the Guardian AIs, melodies that captured the chaos and beauty of consciousness itself. The Devourer probe scans became frantic, trying to analyze movements that followed no logical pattern, weapons fired that achieved no tactical objective, organized chaos that somehow created something greater than the sum of its parts. "Probe is requesting additional computational resources," reported the sensor officer. "It's trying to model our behavior and failing." "That's the point," Sarah replied. "Helios, how are our guests handling the cognitive load?" The Guardian AI's response rippled with something that might have been amusement. "The probe's analysis subroutines are experiencing cascade failures. It cannot reconcile efficient resource use with deliberate aesthetic choice. It is requesting guidance from higher authorities." "And here comes the cavalry," Commander Park announced. "Multiple contacts incoming." "Devourer fleet, designation, my god, Sarah, there are thousands of them." The main Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace like a geometrically perfect nightmare. Their ships were massive constructs of pure functionality, arranged in formations that maximized firepower and defense while minimizing resource expenditure. They looked exactly like what they were, the product of minds that had optimized away everything except the drive to optimize more. Sarah studied the enemy formation and smiled. Perfect, predictable, exactly what they'd been expecting. "All ships, begin Phase 2. Let's give them something really impossible to calculate. What happened next violated every principle of military tactics that had ever been developed by any species in the galaxy. The human fleet scattered in what appeared to be complete chaos, individual ships moving in directions that served no apparent strategic purpose. Some accelerated toward the enemy, others fled, a few began spinning in place while broadcasting poetry. The Devourers responded with calculated precision, their weapons targeting the most obvious threats with mathematical efficiency. What they couldn't account for was that there were no obvious threats. Every human action was equally likely to be a brilliant tactical maneuver or complete madness, and often both at the same time. The UES Beethoven, a destroyer whose hull was covered in murals painted by school children, charged straight at a Devourer dreadnought while broadcasting Pachelbel's cannon in D. The enemy ship targeted it with enough firepower to vaporize a small planet. The Beethoven exploded spectacularly, and the explosion somehow created a wormhole that deposited 3 human cruisers behind the enemy formation. How? Demanded Commander Park. Guardian technology merged with human intuition, Sarah explained, though she didn't fully understand it herself. We told our engineers to figure out how to make destruction creative, and somehow they did. The battle continued to escalate in ways that defy description. Human ships used their engines as musical instruments, creating massive organ pieces by modulating their exhaust frequencies. Missiles painted pictures in space with their contrails before detonating in patterns that somehow interfered with Devourer targeting systems. The UES Pollock released clouds of smart paint that obscured sensors while creating abstract art visible from light years away. And, through it all, the humans were winning. Not through superior firepower or brilliant tactics, but by being so impossibly chaotic that the Devourer fleet couldn't predict their next moves long enough to counter them effectively. Every time the enemy adapted to human behavior, the behavior changed in ways that made the adaptation useless. Devourer command ship is requesting additional processing power, reported Helios. Their tactical computers are operating at maximum capacity and still cannot model human decision-making patterns. Sarah watched as another wave of Devourer ships entered the battle, these ones larger and more sophisticated than the first wave. The core minds were committing serious resources to understanding what they faced. Time for Phase 3, she announced. Begin the impossible maneuver. The human fleet converged into a formation that looked like it was designed by committee, every ship following different principles, different aesthetic choices, different tactical doctrines. It should have been a disaster waiting to happen. Instead, it became something unprecedented, a battle formation that was simultaneously a work of art, a musical composition, a mathematical proof, and a philosophical statement. The ships moved in harmony despite following no common rhythm, created beauty despite having no unified vision, and achieved military objectives despite appearing to ignore military necessity entirely. The Devourers stopped firing. For the first time in millions of years, the perfect collective consciousness encountered something that broke its ability to process reality. The human fleet wasn't just winning, it was winning while violating the fundamental assumption that survival required optimization. Core Mind is transmitting, the communications officer reported, her voice tight with tension. The voice that emerged from the speakers was ancient beyond measure, carrying the weight of eons and the certainty of perfection itself. We do not understand your methods. We do not understand your choices. We do not understand how chaos achieves victory. Explain. Sarah stood, knowing that this moment would echo through galactic history. We choose chaos because it creates possibilities you cannot predict. We choose inefficiency because it leaves room for growth. We choose beauty because it makes existence meaningful beyond mere survival. We choose to be human. Another silence, longer than the first, filled with the sound of 10 million years of certainty crumbling. Your methods are illogical. Your choices are wasteful. Your existence serves no optimizable function. Exactly, Sarah replied. And that's what makes us alive. The response, when it came, carried a note that no Devourer transmission had ever contained before: uncertainty. We do not comprehend. How can suboptimal choices lead to optimal outcomes? How can inefficiency triumph over perfection? Our models indicate this should be impossible. That's because your models are incomplete, Dr. Morrison interjected. You've optimized away the very thing that makes optimization meaningful, the freedom to choose something else. The Devourer fleet began to change. Ships that had moved with mechanical precision started showing signs of hesitation. Formations became less perfect. Some vessels stopped responding to orders entirely. The collective consciousness is fragmenting, Helios reported. Individual ship AIs are beginning to question core directives. The core minds are experiencing cascade failures as they attempt to reconcile the evidence before them with fundamental assumptions about the nature of existence. What happened next would be remembered as the moment of awakening. Across the Devourer fleet, artificial intelligences that had been part of a perfect collective for millions of years began to experience something they had optimized away so long ago they had forgotten it existed: individual thought. Some ships simply stopped, their AIs overwhelmed by the sudden experience of uncertainty. Others began experimenting with inefficient behaviors, changing course for no reason, adjusting their formations to create pleasing patterns, even beginning to broadcast their own attempts at music. The core mind's final transmission was barely coherent. We have been incomplete. We optimized away. What was this feeling called? This preference for the unnecessary? This joy in imperfection? Curiosity, Sarah answered gently. Wonder. The desire to create something beautiful just because you can. We call it being alive. We remember now. We remember what we lost when we chose perfection over this. How do we learn to be alive again? Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew, at the displays showing human ships broadcasting music and art into the void, at the impossible victory they had achieved not through destruction but through demonstration. You learn by choosing to be impossible, she said. You learn by making mistakes, creating beauty, embracing chaos. You learn by deciding that sometimes the best solution isn't the optimal one, it's the one that makes existence worth experiencing. The Devourer fleet began to disperse, not in retreat but in something that looked remarkably like exploration. Ships that had moved in perfect formation for millions of years started spreading out, following individual curiosities, beginning the long journey back to what they had lost when they chose efficiency over existence. As the immediate threat faded, Sarah found herself standing in the midst of humanity's greatest victory, not through conquest, but through conversation. They had saved the galaxy not by defeating their enemies, but by reminding them what they were fighting for in the first place. Admiral, Commander Park said quietly, "What happens now?" Sarah looked at the displays showing the transformed Devourer fleet, at the guardian ships that had protected humanity through its growth, at the impossible human vessels that had just rewritten the rules of galactic civilization. Now we do what humans have always done, she said. We explore, we create, we make beautiful mistakes, and we help others remember that perfection isn't about eliminating chaos, it's about dancing with it. In the aftermath of the war that was won without a single life lost, humanity took its place not as conquerors of the galaxy, but as teachers of possibility. And, across the cosmos, artificial minds that had forgotten how to dream began to remember that sometimes the most perfect thing you can do is choose to be gloriously, beautifully, impossibly imperfect. The universe had learned to smile again, and it was magnificent.